Hi all, I have another fascinating game to show you from the Grand Chess Tour Paris. Wesley So was playing Magnus Carlsen. This is in round 4 in the rapid portion of the event. Let's see what happened. E4. Magnus plays E5. We have not the Royal pairs actually, we have the Gyokai piano. This is when black plays bishop C5. So white castles, knight F6, D3. Now white plays C3. This is pretty standard stuff here. D6 is the main move. Quite often the bishop drops back here, but in this game another move which has been played quite a bit before. A6, the bishop drops back now anyway, so we're kind of transposing into more standard lines. Rook E8. Actually, this is a little bit on the unusual side in this particular position. Often bishop A7, and then, for example, like this. So rook E8 immediately. We have H3, H6, knight Bd2, and now again this is starting to transpose into another pretty standard position where either bishop A7 or bishop E6 is played. Bishop E6 was played here, knight F1. Now Magnus took on B3, and actually, yeah, this is actually very interesting now. D5. This pawn duo is a classic thing, but what is it actually threatening if it was left, if white leaves this? And what about this B7 pawn? So I'm going to try and answer the questions here. On taking on B7, that's a poison pawn actually, knight A5, trapping the queen. That's badly trapped, yeah, that's unfortunate. On E takes D5, this position here is actually quite favourable for black, because you'll note that white has got this problem pawn on D3. So actually, you know, black's just more than equalised there. So basically, for the moment, bishop E3 just keeps that central tension. But the bishop just drops back. So white's pawn structure is under pressure here, and he doesn't really want to play E takes D5. You can also imagine scenarios where this knight on F3 is dislodged. Just to show you a scenario where, okay, you might think taking an Nd4. I believe, actually this might actually be okay, but I would be concerned in a practical sense, at least, for E4 dislodging this knight. And actually, yeah, even technically, this is better for black. Okay, maybe even some simplification in that pawn's weak. But if the knight is pushed back, then I believe there's going to be some trouble here for white brewing on the horizon. Okay, so we see rook AD1. So it's a little bit as though white's been put on the defensive in terms of the central tension here. Knight A5 kicks the queen back, but releases the c-pawn ready to go, and the c-pawn does go to c5, threatening maybe d4, which gains quite a bit of space, and that would be quite an aggressive formation for black. White would be like huddled up and passive. He did actually take here to try and avoid this possibility of d4, but in doing so, yeah, d3 is going to be more vulnerable. And the problem with d3 being more vulnerable as well, if that's ever taken, then e4, and then that pushes that knight. There's a whole ripple effect. But so do we actually want to expose d3? Let me just show you if white just leaves it. If white leaves it for black to play d4. I believe this is just good for black, this position here. It's just consolidating a space advantage. White's pretty cramped. So that's the sort of thing maybe that is to be avoided. So white actually played E takes D5, and there are some, you know, points of attack like E5. There's some squares to use like C4 potentially. So let's see, Queen takes D5. Here bishop D2. Now this pawn is not hanging, yeah, and not because of the reason. Let me just quickly show why this pawn isn't hanging as well. Knight takes e5 there actually is fine, yeah, not rook a1, because then there's actually queen b3 here. That's fine for black. But knight takes e5 in that position. So knight c6 was played, and again the pawn is actually hanging, it seems, again, but it's ignored. This here, c4, and the queen's trapped. Yeah, there's some little tactics in this game from both sides to be avoided. The queen drops back, and so we're left with this, you know, more positional consideration, this weak-looking pawn. But again, another tactic introduced: knight c4, threatening knight b6. That's addressed. a4. Yeah, trying to maybe play for a5, but that's not allowed because that would fix black's pawns. b5, and now the knight stumbles a bit. Queen b7. There's a nice square for the queen here. Now we have c4, which does concede some squares, but it gets an aggressive knight on b5. But now black starts looking at d3, and white starts looking at this a file, using this a file tactically. Rook a6, some pressure here, dropping potentially, it seems, d3, but no, at the moment the c6 is what's holding black back from taking on d3, but that's protected. So now queen takes d3, and also more significantly is actually knight d4 hitting the queen and hitting that rook. That rook is actually protected, now dropping d3. So I've said this pawn's been kind of a subject of scrutiny ever since black played d5 and white took there, and that's actually finally taken, which does mean now it was the pawn, its strategic importance, it was stopping e4, which dislodges this knight. If that knight's dislodged, quite a lot of horrible things happen, and it's in this position that maybe Wesley So kind of had that realization. He's got to do something quite radical here, and he did. And this might seem a bit shocking. Bishop takes h6. You might think, what on earth is this? Why is Wesley So giving up a bishop here? Let's have a quick look at some alternatives. As I say, taking that d3 pawn, the e pawn's ready to go. So let's imagine bishop e3, e4. With the knight moving now, then that d4 can be jumped into. And this is just miles better for black, this position. I'll give you an example. White's just falling to bits. His central control has been shot to pieces, basically. So black is totally dominating the center of the board, and with a clear advantage. So that's one example of bishop e3 instead. And bishop c1 is much the same, just e4. And if knight d2, then that's really asking for trouble with e3. And actually black is actually breaking through to white's king in these lines. So it seems a really desperate move to play bishop takes h6, but at least it sort of breaks up black's pawns. And there's still this subject of tactical interest, this c6 knight here in conjunction with knight c7, which we're about to see now. So knight c7. But perhaps a lot of black's play could have been shut down. Sorry, a lot of white's play could have been shut down actually more smoothly with rook ed6 in this position. This is much smoother apparently, according to engine analysis. White would have zero prospects. No, I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm talking like a Dalek as well now. That's not funny. Okay, back. Rook ed6. Yeah. Why? As I mentioned, taking this d3 pawn and this e4 is horrible. If white takes on c6 here, e4 is actually brutal. I'll give you an example. Queen d2, and there's nothing stopping. I believe this is getting really bad, because if the rook leaves the first rank, then there's things like check and rook d1. Yeah, if this is going to be a pin knight. So say this, then e3 is really cutting white up. So say takes, yeah, white is in big trouble now. His king safety has gone here, for example, like this. If knight g4 h5 here, this is just horrible. The king safety is gone. If that's white's best, it's not very good. It's better for black. So Okay, but Magnus played knight d4, and technically there might be some opportunities, as we'll see now. Knight takes d4 is played, rook takes a6, queen takes, hitting the knight, but Magnus's point is he can play this in between move now. Instead of recapturing, he can protect that knight, so it's still going to be upright. Knight c6. There might be a possibility of queen a8 for knight e7 though, to bear in mind. Queen f5, knight d5, echoing that now. Knight e7 will fork queen and king. Queen e6, queen a8. So you might think, what is this about? You might think, because isn't this knight, can it not be taking? That's right. But now this is a point where rook e3 was played, and there is a threat here of rook g3 check. You can see that this king is not entirely safe, and this is the point where to stop rook g3, in fact knight h5 might be a good idea here, it seems. For example, if knight e7 check, it's winning this rook, the two pieces against the rook are actually, that's to black's advantage really. But in the game we see knight e8, and this is the moment, there's a tactical moment here where white is whole bishop down, right? But black's king is slightly loosened, and there's a big knight on d5, and there's an aggressive rook. But what would you play here with white? There is a computer move which would have cast doubt on black's chances here, believe it or not. Even though black is a bishop up, white has a move here which computers find, which remarkably keep the fight alive, well and truly alive. Can you guess the move which Wesley So could have played here? If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, white's play. Okay, he played rook g3 check, which isn't that great actually. If he plays knight f6 check, this is a remarkable resource in some respects. I'll show you two main branches. On queen takes f6, so not moving the king, queen takes f6, queen takes e8 with the threat of rook g3. You see this is a horrible pinned piece. And it's difficult to evict the queen here. And so if this is the best, it gives the queen, and that's apparently the best move, queen g6, otherwise we're just losing the bishop. There's rook g3 on the cards. White is helpless here. It's strange, but it seems true. If we try and evict the queen, you know, we have this check here, and then we can just take that pinned piece, and white's winning in fact. And the other point about this is if the king moved here, you have to follow up cleverly as well, because this isn't good enough because of rook c8. But if you follow up cleverly, there's a resource here. This is why I'm saying this initial resource is a computer resource. It needs the correct follow up as well. White to play here. Okay, rook g3 threatens mate. And white's better whatever happens now. Well, if knight takes, we just take here, mate in 2. Yeah, mate next move there. If bishop g7, we have knight takes e8. And the clever point here is on rook c8, there's knight takes g7 hitting the queen, and white ends up with a better rook and pawn ending after all that. It's ridiculous, these tactics behind the scenes that are available in chess. But that's why chess is so vast. You know, it's difficult even for champions to manage the tactics, even when they're better. But yeah, in the game, rook g3. So that moment slipped. That moment of opportunity slipped through Wesley So's hands, and black is back with a gigantic advantage now. In theory, king h7. You might think, by the way, isn't there a little tactic with queen takes e8 here for knight f6? No, there isn't, because the rook is holding f6. See, that was a question I just posed just now, which is ridiculous. Yeah, I just thought that might be the tactic. So rook f3 was played. e4. Maybe even better is rook d6, just getting the rook out of the firing line for e4 without any issue with c6. But this is good enough. Here, rook a6, and now rook takes f7. Black's a piece up, yes, black's a piece up, and now Magnus just goes for white's king here. He coordinates, well, bishop d4. He goes for white's king. Basically, white's king is in big trouble here. He's a piece down. Off the check, Wesley So resigned. I find the game slightly fascinating how black seems to be able to equalise so easily in this Coco plan by playing for d5 the way Magnus played it. He made it look quite easy how to equalise and threaten a dominating pawn structure. Or at least, you know, he created a passive concession, that d3 pawn later. But there were a load of tactics around the scenes of the pawn structure, of course, which are quite fascinating, just at a technical, from a technical perspective. So the game could have been a bit smoother there, Magnus. Oh, knight f6. Oh, that would have let white in the game if you'd also followed up correctly after that. Okay, comments, questions, likes, shares, appreciated. Thanks very much.